Open letter to the United Nations. This open letter follows up on an earlier email sent on the 3rd of March 2025. Aceh, a sovereign nation erased by genocide, ignored by the world, betrayed by the UN. If one child is raped in Europe, the world mourns. Why were 20,000 Acehnese children raped until they died, and the world stayed silent and forgotten? 2. United Nations Secretary-General, President of the UN Human Rights Council, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OIC, and all leaders of conscience, Excellencies, my name is Sultan Fariz Saya, direct descendant of the royal house of the Kingdom of Aceh Darussalam. I am writing this letter not with pride, but with sorrow, for I carry the weight of a nation whose cries for justice have echoed into silence. Aceh is a sovereign nation, and below, I present the historical and legal evidences that prove it without dispute. Aceh is not a regional province, it is a nation under military occupation, whose sovereignty was erased by force. The genocide against Aceh, 1950 to 2025, from 1950 to 2025, more than 213,000 Acehnese civilians have been killed, tortured, raped, or forcibly disappeared by the Indonesian military and police. This is not a vague historical claim, but a documented fact backed by reports from Contras, Amnesty International, Komnas HAM, AJAR, and Aceh-based archives, as well as international monitoring by Human Rights Watch, TAPOL, UN Special Rapporteurs, and documented in BBC, CNN, and Al Jazeera coverage. 38,000 adult women raped and executed. 7,000 Islamic scholars, Daya teachers, and students killed. Over 2,100 villages burned by TNI Brimob. Over 300 mass graves confirmed, from Aceh Timur to Aceh Barat. Thousands of homes confiscated, WAC land seized by state and foreign corporations. At least 43,000 children abducted and murdered, of which 20,000 were victims of rape, gang rape, or ritual abuse, many of whom were burned alive. Land grabbed in Aceh, 1950 to 2025, as a certified team leader in Environmental Impact Assessment, EIA, I have personally witnessed the abuse of licensing laws and environmental permits to enable these land grabs, including falsified AMDAL documents, intimidation of community leaders, and militarization of conservation zones. More than 3.8 million hectares of Acehnese land have been seized by the Indonesian state or licensed to private and foreign companies. These include WAC lands converted into state and commercial property, royal inheritance and ulayat territories militarized and licensed for extraction, thousands of villages depopulated and declared national forest or industrial zones. These acts constitute violations of UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP Basic Principles and Guidelines on the Right to Remedy and Reparation, UN Convention Against Torture, CAT, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, Article 6, 7, 24, International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, ICESCR, International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, ICERD, International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, and its optional protocols, Geneva Conventions, IV, Articles 3 and 27, 1948 Genocide Convention, especially Article 2, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm, Article 2, C, deliberately inflicting conditions calculated to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, ICC, Article 7 Crimes against Humanity. Rape, sexual slavery, enforced disappearance, persecution of children, torture. Article 8 War Crimes. Recruitment or use of children under 15, attacks against civilians. Customary international law, including prohibitions against pillage and land seizure. Forced displacement of indigenous peoples. Sexual violence as a tool of war, cultural genocide, persecution of children and religious minorities. Indonesia is a terrorist and colonizer. The silence of the international community is not neutrality, it is complicity. Naming the victims, naming the perpetrators. We have documented hundreds of cases. Here are a few. Layla Khadija, 8, raped and murdered by Sertu Bambang Sutrisno. Nurul Aini, 7, abducted and killed by Bribtu Hendra Wahyudi. Siti Aisyah, 9, raped in front of her mother by 2 soldiers from Kodiem 0103 Aceh Tamiang. Zulkarnaini, 14, shot for refusing to sing the Indonesian national anthem. Hassana, 11, gang raped by 4 Brimob members in Paya Bekong, then strangled to death. 2003, Maimuna, 10, found dead near an army outpost in Matang Kuli, with signs of prolonged sexual torture. 1998, Umi Kalsum, 12, abducted during military raid in Julak, raped by soldiers from Yanif 133, body found burned in nearby forest. 2002, Farida Rama, 9, raped and mutilated by joint TNI Brimob patrol in Punaran, East Aceh. 2001, Nadia Salsabila, 10, held captive for 5 days and repeatedly raped by Kopassus members in Blang Padi, found unconscious in a ditch. 1999, Ramad Ilham, 13, tortured to death in front of his parents in Kajorik for refusing to reveal his brother's location. 2003, Salsabila Munira, 7, raped and burned alive by TNI post commander in Kroon, Maine. 2004, Kairanisa, 6, abducted from refugee camp in Langsa, raped by 2 soldiers, body found under bridge. 2003, TGK. Tengku Bantakia, an Islamic scholar, executed with his students in Butong, Aceh. 1999, TGK. H. Ismail Lamjabit, killed after Friday prayer by Kopassus Major Nur Cholas. 1992, entire generations have been erased from the memory of the world, and still the perpetrators walk free. Aceh is a sovereign nation. Here are the proof of Aceh's sovereignty. 1. Aceh has a written constitution, Kanan Mukuda Alam, the foundational legal code of the kingdom, governing law, justice, military, trade, religious duties and international relations, supported by over 24 kanan that governs about lands, sea, married, ceremonies, forest, river and many important aspects of life. These kanan or laws was written or approved by women scholars. You can see these kanans protected civilians like a mother protecting their children. 2. Aceh had its own national flag, the Alam Pudung, red with Islamic script, symbolizing independence and governance. 3. Aceh had its own currency, Mas Aceh, a gold coin circulated across the Indian Ocean world, inscribed with Islamic phrases and symbols. 4. Aceh signed international treaties with world powers, Portugal, 1521, the Ottoman Empire, 1565, the Dutch, 1602, and the British, 1613, recognized as an equal sovereign. And also have treaties with 28 more nations. In total, Aceh have 32 treaties. 5. Aceh maintained embassies and royal envoys, including formal relations with Mecca, the Mughal Empire, and France. 6. Aceh had a sovereign navy, among the strongest in Southeast Asia during the 16th-17th centuries, enabling long-distance diplomatic and trade missions. The first women admiral navy was well known around the globe. Laksamana Kemalahayati 7. Aceh's monarchy was internationally recognized, with Sultan Iskandar Muda known as King of Kings of the East by the Ottomans. 8. Aceh had independent governance institutions, Majlis Syura, religious council, and a complete legal juridical system. Aceh also had a structured education system, from Balai Pengajian, primary religious education, to Daya and Pesantren, higher Islamic boarding schools, where both boys and girls were educated in fiqh, tafsir, language, and civic values. These institutions were supervised by the ulama and played a key role in shaping Aceh's statecraft, justice, and international diplomacy. 9. Aceh has its own indigenous language, the Acehnese language, complete with grammar, syntax, rich oral tradition, and classical proverbs such as Hadamaha, moral and philosophical sayings. In recent years, thanks to global recognition, Acehnese has been added to Google Translate, affirming its linguistic validity and cultural endurance. 10. Aceh have cultures such as arts performances, Puga Haba, storytelling for 7 nights or more non-stop, Saman, Radib Muscat, Sedati and many more. Aceh the first nation in Asia who buried the dead properly with names and date. It's called Batu Aceh, Aceh Stone. 11. Aceh was never legally included in the Indonesian Republic. There was no ratified act of unification, only military invasion in 1950. 12. Aceh is a proper indigenous people, sons of the soil that preserved a unique legal and cultural system, distinct from Javanese, Malay, or other Indonesian kingdoms. 13. Aceh fulfills the criteria of sovereignty under the Montevideo Convention, 1933, or even more than other nations. Permanent population checkmark. Defined territory checkmark, government checkmark, capacity for foreign relations checkmark. If Aceh is not recognized as a proper country, then many other nations that were born through similar or even less defined criteria should also not be recognized. Nations such as Kosovo, Palestine, East Timor, and South Sudan all received recognition under international law with less historical and legal evidence than Aceh possesses. Therefore, to deny Aceh is to betray the very principles of the Montevideo Convention and to deny the right of indigenous nations to exist. Lack of response from international bodies. Aceh was a sovereign kingdom with embassies, treaties, gold currency, and a proper constitution, Kanan Mukuda Alam. We signed internationally recognized treaties with Portugal, 1521, the Dutch East India Company, 1602, and the British East India Company, 1613, as sovereign equals. We were never legally integrated into Indonesia. The annexation was a betrayal and a fraud. Today, our lands are stripped for ExxonMobil, Medco, Part Pim, and other companies. Our language, history, and identity erased in Indonesian textbooks. Our sacred texts burned, our children hunted. In 2004, when the tsunami devastated Aceh, even the natural world seemed to cry out. The entire world responded, millions donated, prayed, and pledged support. However, all international aid was seized and managed by the Indonesian state. According to World Bank reports and credible watchdogs, much of that aid was lost to corruption. Acehese survivors received little to none. Yet, no sanctions were issued, no UN inquiry initiated. Why? Why was our suffering once again filtered through the hands of our oppressors and colonizers, and ignored? Is this not hypocritical? The United Nations is fully aware that Indonesia is a human rights violator whose armed forces include documented child rapists and war criminals. The World Bank and IMF themselves have published evidence of widespread corruption and theft by Indonesian authorities. And yet, the same institutions still shake hands, sign agreements, and party with those very perpetrators. Don't you think is complicity and complete ignorant? Where is your conscience? Where is your duty to protect the innocent? I personally emailed the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights on the 13th of March 2025, providing verified case documentation and evidence. Until today, no reply has been received. If in Europe one child is raped, the world unites in outrage. In Aceh, 20,000 children were raped, often for days, in groups, until they died, yet the world remains silent. Do Acehese children not deserve the same human rights? This silence from the highest offices entrusted with human rights protections is alarming and deeply painful for victims and survivors. The time to act is now. We ask of you 1. Open an ICC investigation into war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity committed in Aceh by the Indonesian military and state actors. 2. Impose sanctions against military officials, including Prabowo Subianto, whose forces oversaw the Darurat military operations. 3. Call for independent forensic exhumation of 300-plus mass graves in Aceh. 4. Recognize Aceh as a nation under occupation, deserving of self-determination under UN Charter Article 1, 2. Help Acehese to restore their own laws, language, and culture, without the interference of the Indonesian regime. 5. Demand Indonesia cease the persecution of Acehese survivors, and immediately withdraw all Indonesian military and police personnel from Aceh. 6. Declare ExxonMobil and all associated corporations complicit in war crimes under the principles of corporate responsibility, including the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, UNGPs, and OECD Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises. These companies, including Medco Energy, Pertamina, Triangle Pace Inc., Repsol, Part Pim, PT Arun, and others, have operated with full knowledge of human rights atrocities and environmental violations in Aceh. Their licenses must be revoked, their operations shut down, and they must be held accountable under international law. If justice is not delivered, the soil of Aceh will remain a mass grave with no tombstones, and the UN will bear the stain of silence. We are not seeking vengeance. We are demanding truth, justice, and remembrance. According to 2005 World Bank and USAID evaluations, nearly 30% of tsunami aid was lost to mismanagement, with key disbursements blocked from Acehese hands. If justice is not delivered, Aceh will remain a mass graveyard without tombstones, and the stain will fall not only on Indonesia, but on the world's conscience. A nation that buries its children cannot heal. A world that turns away from murdered children cannot call itself civilized. Act now. May the voices of murdered children echo through the halls of your conscience. I stand not for personal gain, nor for title, but for justice for my people. This letter is not a request, it is a final plea before silence becomes history. We call upon the United Nations and all global bodies of law to act immediately, to investigate, to name the crimes, to name the criminals, and to uphold the rights of those who can no longer speak. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullah, Sultan Fariz Saya, descendant of Kingdom of Aceh Darussalam. Currently in exile, the 17th of July 2025.